going on? It's Preacher. We're doing the Arcane Mage. Yes, we are. I'm kind of interested to see where this goes. I've been doing a few runs of it. I'm undecided as of yet as to what I actually think of this spec. I'm hoping that it's going to be more interesting for you guys, to say the least. Arcane has a long and sordid history of being, well, let's just say, a bit boring as crap. I hated it in Cataclysm. Absolutely hated it. Get my Rune of Power down. Let me guess, you're going to move again. That would be awesome. Now, I should be doing the AoE rotation here, which is heavily about Arcane Explosion and Flame Strike and stuff like that. But I actually want to show you some of the cleave abilities. If we get a 6 proc here. Got a lot of mobs here. Now, this Arcane Barrage is what's been introduced to sort of give Arcane the feeling of being having some sort of AoE viability. As Arcane is traditionally, not that I'm one for tradition myself, and neither is Blizzard, tradition dictates that Arcane should be about single target, cleave the crap out of stuff. You can see even there doing a sort of improper AoE does result in some nice DPS there. That was 71k. But what you're supposed to do, if you get into these AoE sitches, is get in there with your Arcane Explosions. You can see Arcane Explosion just refresh your Arcane charges, and it has a chance to, as well, give you extra charges. So let's talk about how the Arcane Mage is playing. If you guys are looking to try this spec, play this spec and all that good stuff. First of all, your level 90 talents are very important, especially your Rune of Power. Your Rune of Power replaces your Evocation, and as this spec is based entirely on how much mana you have, very important that you position it somewhere smart, where you can get the best use out of it. Our next process is very simple. It is still a very simplistic spec, there's no doubt about that. It's building getting to 6 Arcane charges as efficiently as possible, and then dumping them with our Arcane Barrage. And you can do that either through Arcane Blast, which costs you mana, or the Arcane Missiles. Arcane Missiles allow you to regenerate a lot of mana in the meantime, so positioning of use of Arcane Missiles is pretty cool. One thing you're going to notice very quickly is your Arcane charges expire pretty damn fast. Something, again, it's very annoying, similar to the Monk, is that we'd like them to not do that, quite frankly. We would very much like them to not do that. I would like to be able to use them. But this spec, as you've just seen, it hits very, very hard. It does hit very hard. We should have an interesting time in this boss. I'm just going to refresh my Rune of Power. It's bound to expire soon enough. We should have an interesting time in this boss because we can't stand still a lot. Now, that doesn't benefit a lot of specs, as I understand. But Arcane suffers a lot from not being able to stand still and cast its Arcane Blast. It really does get punished for that. I'm at 6 charges now. I'm not going to dump this yet. I'm going to follow up with a nice big Arcane Barrage cleave immediately onto these, giving me, you know, 300,000 damage. This thing just churns out a lot of damage quite naturally. I can't complain at that. It does the damage. It does the damage. Now, the style of play, it still needs a lot of work. I'm not really sure who Arcane appeals to. I really do not know. If you want a simple style of play, you've got Fire, and Fire is immensely more fun. Of course, that is just my opinion. But Fire is immensely more interesting than what I'm doing now. This spec has changed from Cataclysm, where it was mocked for its style of play, which was hit 2-2-2-2-2, which was Arcane Barrage, Arcane Blast, continuously and for a long-ass period of time. Now it's mixed in Arcane Missiles as a proc, which, to be fair, hasn't looked an awful lot for it. I'll blink through that. I want to get back to my Rune of Power before I go too crazy. Let's get this down. Right, Arcane Power. Get the Frostbomb on. You still want to keep your Frostbomb. Now, under the effects of Arcane Power, you want to be spamming and getting to 6 charges as quickly as possible. Blink through there again. And keeping yourself above 80% mana. The whole crux of this spec is keeping above 80% mana for as long as humanly possible. Slacky on the Frostbomb Preacher. 80% mana is a good place to be. So if you do tend to drop below there for whatever reason, that's where your mana gem comes in. It's one of the only specs that sort of requires the mana gem. And generally it's if you screw up, if you cast an Arcane Blast at 6 charges, something like that, your mana's going to start dipping relatively quickly. And you don't want that to happen. You need your mana to stay around 80%. So while we're using Arcane Power, which is obviously our major DPS cooldown, one of the big tricks there is to definitely be using your Arcane Missiles when they proc. That's going to allow you to regenerate a ton of mana while still under the effects of Arcane Power, which is going to keep your mana nice and high. It's not like the old ways of dumping as much mana as possible. That's not the way you want to play this one. Now, you're either going to pull a lot or you're going to stay there. So I'm just going to drop my Rune of Power. It looks like he's moving on. There's some advanced styles to play, advanced style of play with this one, which very much revolves around planning of arcane missiles. But ultimately, that is sort of adding a challenge in words that doesn't really exist, in my opinion. It's just not there. Ultimately, you can either waste your arcane missiles or not, and wasting arcane missiles is just wasting arcane charges, which means you're failing, quite frankly, and you don't want to do that. You really just do not want to do that. So I'm going to keep my arcane charges up, and then use my arcane explosion in this situation. Because you'll drop a flame strike as well, but frankly, you're just going to be arcane explosion a hell of a lot during your AoE, and keep it refreshing your stacks. You can see I've got this tell me when here, telling me arcane charges stacks. And when it gets down to 3, I can just arcane barrage it off, and then start again. And conjure myself a mana gem. In terms of things that this spec could do with, it could just do with a bit of variety. More than that, it could just do with something more to make it a little bit entertaining. We're all well and good with a single target based spec. I don't think there's any problem with that at all. But this spec requires mana. Your level 90 talents on the mage require you to be stood still or to be casting evocation, a lot of things. But due to the nature of invocation, it's not beneficial to this spec. In fact, the level 90 talents seem very... This Rune of Power works. It makes sense for Arcane to want to stand still and do a shitload of single target DPS. But our raid bosses just do not work that way, unfortunately. They don't work that way. Like, this should be a reasonably good situation for us. As we don't do any dot damage, we're going to be pretty easily switching between these. So where's our tank looking at? There's our tank. He's looking at Strife. Good. Pop our mirror images. Get our Frostbomb on. And then start spamming Arcane Blast. Now, again, under this Arcane Power moment, I want to keep my mana as high as possible. Because I'm going to do the vast majority of my damage there. At 6 seconds left, I'm going to use my altered time so I can get back to it. Switch over to Peril. Still want to keep your Frostbomb up. And now I'm at 80% mana. I'm going to use that mana gem. I'm going to Arcane Barrage. And that puts me back at 100% mana. Which then allows you to switch it up again. And again, it's all about just finding the most efficient way to get to 6 stacks. Once you're at 6 stacks, dump it away. And then continue the rotation. That's it. It's so simple. I'm literally keeping Frostbomb up. Keeping Frostbomb up. And just finding the most efficient way to 6 stacks of Arcane Barrage. And once I've done that, I'm more than happy to just continue this continuing on as normal. So now we're down to normal DPS. Get the Rune of Power down. While his stacks come off. 12 seconds left on ultimately power. And that's no problem. You can see you do a vast majority of your damage there. One big issue with this is you ultimately can sort of play this spec with your foot. I think that is one of the things I'd like to take away with this. I'd like to educate you on making this spec worthwhile. Maybe some tips and tricks, some variety in play. If we say with fire, we're choosing different things between where to even something as simple as where to drop our freeze from our pet can do nice little wonders for our DPS. Arcane just doesn't have that. You've only got... We're realistically talking 4 buttons, that's including your bomb, and then your DPS cooldown. So 5 buttons, that's about it. You're not going to use much more than that unless you're in a situation that is not DPS related. For DPS related things, not much else to do. So I'm just going to position myself here. I'm going to drop a Rune of Power there. See what this guy does. Get my Frostbomb on. And then start spamming this. And I prefer this style of play to the Arcane style of play. Not that it's much of a style of play. It's just a personal choice as to how I want to do my DPS. I'm going to drop my Rune of Power there. I could do more DPS now running around pressing Arcane Explosion. Frankly, I don't like that. What I like doing is firing in my big 1 million Arcane Barrage cleaves. I prefer that style completely. I think it's more arcane-y, it's more fun. It kind of feels strange, I've said in the other videos that it doesn't feel very arcane-y to it doesn't feel very frosty or fiery to be using Arcane Explosion. But even with Arcane, it's not for me. It's not for me. This is a much more interesting style of play. Still pulling 100k DPS using an incorrect style of play. If you guys want to maximize your AoE, you will of course be running in and doing some flame strikes and arcane explosions, but that's entirely down to you. More about pre-planning this runic power. Get a Frostbomb on, then arcane power it up, and again we're trying to keep our mana high, and we still want to get to that 6 stacks. Now the only difference is while under the effects of arcane power is while we're staying at 6 stacks until it runs out, until arcane power expires, and then using that mana gem just to top yourself straight back up. and then using arcane missiles, and you see my mana bar is going straight back up to a really nice position and still rebuilding those charges. So I'm back up above 80% mana. Keep your frost bomb on cooldown and then just continue to get back to 6 charges. At 6 charges, arcane barrage it away. Barrage. I don't know why I'm saying barrage, but whatever. Barrage! But things like this, even in this 5-man, you can see there's probably a lot of opportunity here where I'll have to move, which I don't really want to do. This is not conducive to my spec at all, is to move. It doesn't help me whatsoever to do that. I would certainly feel like this is one of the weaker specs. Or the weakest of the specs. Again, Rune of Power down. All the level 90 mage abilities suck. We are aware of it. They need to change it. They're just not interesting and not fun. They all stop you doing damage for gross amounts of time, quite frankly. Really gross amounts of time. I don't know what they were thinking with it. Maybe they just wanted mages to have a sort of bursty glass cannon feel to them. I can sort of see the reasoning behind that. But with your single target, that is your job, that is your duty, is your raison d'etre, is your reason for being alive, is you are a single target burst spec as an arcane mage. There will be a time, my friends, when a raid will call upon something to be killed extremely quickly, which will involve arcane with max charges under arcane power, doing absolutely insane burst, and then going back to doing jack-all mana management in between time. I will say, I will point out this, not to make this a total downer in perspective of the Arcane Mage, is I do like some of the changes, such as mana management itself is no longer just something boring that required us to get clear cast procs and so on and so forth. I'm actually going to save my arcane power at the moment, so I'm going to get one use of it until we come out of this initial phase. It was very much a case in the past that mana management was the be-all and end-all. It certainly added a skill level to the Arcane Mages, which was kind of laughable at the time. Most people saw it as laughable, and I don't blame them. That it was looked upon as a skill-based sort of facet of the class was to look after your mana effectively. Now let's Arcane power it up. I've got Alter Time ready as well. I'm going to Alter Time there. Keeping the mana high. That is my entire job. There you can see Alter Time bringing me back to 6 charges straight away. Mana Gem to bring me back up to good amounts of mana. Rune of Power down. Rune of Power, remember, is not only is it a damage buff, but it's literally refilling your mana all the time. And as this spec is entirely based around how much mana you have, it's important. It's actually imperative that you do that. And pretty good. We killed it in one phase. No big deal whatsoever from that. So a pretty simple look at the Arcane Mage, but a pretty simple spec. Few changes in Mists of Pandaria, but not enough to tickle my nuts. Anyway, if you enjoy this style of play, fair play to you, and I'll have a great time. But ultimately, it needs a little bit more tweaking. I understand it exists, but I think specs existing like this allow for bosses to be designed around the idea that raids can, in fact, induce tremendous amounts of burst damage on demand. But that's the way it goes. Alright, ballers, there's your Arcane Mage. You take it easy. Play fire. Bye.